The Sweet Sound of Success show is brought to you by the Mentor Studio. The Mentor Studio is an exclusive mentoring and training program for social influencers, business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches, and startups, bringing personal development to the underserved around the world. And brought to you by Success Strategists. Simple strategies that work to develop your business with flow and ease using proven strategies and the right tactics. This is the Sweet Sound of Success with Sue Wilhite, Success Attraction Expert. From fear to faith is a repeated theme for Lisa Marie Platske. She survived a childhood rife with domestic violence, flourished in a 10-year career in law enforcement, and 17 years ago started her successful leadership coaching business, UpsideThinking. Lisa Marie embodies courageous commitment to making a positive difference. Welcome, Lisa Marie.
Hi, Sue. So delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, well, I'm delighted. This is going to be a fun interview.
Absolutely. It's one of my values is fun. I like to have fun in whatever I'm doing.
Right. Absolutely. And I'll let our listeners know that this is going to be a hero's journey for real. So, and for those of you who have no clue what a hero's journey is all about, there was a wonderful mythologist, which I think is one of the best jobs in the world, Dr. Joseph Campbell, who spent his entire career researching, studying, traveling, and learning the stories, the myths, the legends from every culture on the planet. And I do mean every culture. He went everywhere. And what he noticed is that there are certain commonalities to these stories. And he identified 16 different ones. And we're not going to do all 16, just so you know. And those 16 were describe the hero's journey in detail. And we're going to do just 5 of these that I feel are really relevant to the entrepreneur's journey. Entrepreneurs are a special category of heroes, right? That's what we are. And I love to present this because every entrepreneur has an origin story. And I think entrepreneurs need to know which each other's origin stories are because we're all unique and we're all heroes. So those 5 pieces that we're going to talk about are the ordinary beginning. Where did you start? The call to action. What brought you out of the quote unquote ordinariness that may or may not have been so ordinary. The big hairy monsters. And sometimes those big hairy monsters are kind of wrapped up in the call to action. They can come before, during, and after. And 2 things that I think are really important for entrepreneurs, and they're both involving people. And the first one is allies, mentors, guides, coaches, folks who helped, people who were there for you, people who were your cheerleaders, people who just, in passing said, hey, you're doing a good job. Those are the people that we need in our lives. And then there's the folks that we get in our lives anyway, which Joseph Campbell called the journey home. And the journey home has to do with those people who have not necessarily had that transformational entrepreneurial hero's journey. And they're a bit puzzled, confused, or possibly even outright hostile toward what it is that you're doing. And you need to deal with them. The allies, mentors, and coaches, it's really easy to say thank you, and that was great. For the other folks, it's a little tougher and trickier to deal with them because a lot of times they only have your best interests at heart and they really want you to be successful and they don't want you to suffer pain. So they're just telling you about that in a kind of a weird way. So, Lisa Marie, what was your ordinary beginning?
My ordinary beginning. I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I was the product of a two parents who couldn't live together in the same household. And so at 6, my mom became a single mom, and my sister and I grew up going to Catholic school and being not so ordinary, didn't grow up in the same neighborhood, actually traipsed across town. That my mom would wake us up at 6 o'clock in the morning and take us over to my grandparents. And then from there, we would walk to school and go to school in the Catholic school that was near their home. And it was a very different environment than where I grew up, and loved spending time with my grandparents and enjoyed, every moment of that. And so I feel really blessed and really fortunate that I had that experience. And I understand, now how many of my friends didn't have that. And I don't know that I really realized how unique and special that was back then. And
like a kind of a refuge.
Yeah, it was just, they were such special people, and I received so many gifts from them, from connection to positioning to business traits that I use today. And because I actually ended up spending so much time with my grandfather, it really is what opened the door for me when I went into law enforcement. So, went to college, went off to school. So it didn't seem like it was all that extraordinary, except it was very unusual for my family. And so many of the things I share are not ordinary, in the sense that they just are so different within my family unit. And as a child, I called the police a lot for what would be domestic violence incidents. And it was very painful. And a lot of just me being in the center of it all. So I went into law enforcement, and part of it was that, without really realizing it on a conscious level, the police were the good guys. They came to save the day. And so there was something about having a blue uniform and a badge and a gun, and something about doing that. I worked federal, and yet there was an element of the hero, if you will. And I always loved, superheroes like the Superman and Batman and all of that, for that reason, because they were the good guys to come in and save the day. And so, after college, went into banking and then federal law enforcement. And so, that's a piece of my ordinary story, Sue.
Wow. Well, going into federal law enforcement, I go with you there. That's not ordinary in the least. That's not what you call, oh yeah, everybody grows up going, I'm going to go into federal law enforcement.
Exactly. And I don't know that it's not like I had that as my dream either. I actually wasn't going to go to college, Sue. I mean, I was, people in my family didn't go to college. So what it was for me is, when I found out that you then had to get a job, I was like, oh, okay. You mean I could extend this school thing, which is actually pretty easy? Oh, okay. Well, then I'll go do that. And it was actually because I didn't have that in my circle. There was a woman that ran on the cross country team with me, and her father was the dean of a university, and everything for her was like, of course you go to college. And so she's the one who would speak about it. And then the newspaper had a little blurb in the top of the newspaper. I mean, they used to bring it to the house, and outside your house back in the day when that's how people got news. And and I saw this little thing that said, college was like college, how to prepare to get into college, like something like that. One of those, marketing blurbs. And the newspaper was running 4 like sessions that were free that anybody in the community could sign up to, and how to apply to college, how to, because back then community it's just different than it is today. So much is online now. And back then it was you actually gathered. And so I showed up with hundreds of other people, maybe even, thousands in an auditorium on how to apply to college. So, sort of interesting, right? Like, and when I went to apply for federal law enforcement, I went to the library. Like there was no internet. So I had to go through these like file folder things to, Dewey Decimal System to look at the, how to find jobs and careers in criminal justice. I mean, it's just crazy, when I think about it.
Yes, and the library had books like that. I remember, careers in fill in the blank.
Exactly.
There were just shelves of these things,
Mm-hmm.
and every year they were updated,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's mind-boggling. Every year they were updated.
Right.
Updated on the spot, like somebody, one thing went out and one thing went in. No, you went in a year.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And then you still had to be able to find it. It's not like you typed it in and it showed up. Like you had to actually walk through the racks and find it. So yeah.
Right. Exactly. So what was your call to action? What having gone to this federal law enforcement career, what got you out of that?
So I always thought that I would stay in federal law enforcement. I loved it. I loved the variety. I loved the intrigue. I loved that every day was different. I loved the ability. I was very motivated to make my own schedule. I rose through the ranks and got to teach at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I got to develop curriculum post 9/11 for the leaders of the Department of Homeland Security and leadership. Like I loved what I got to do. And when I was in law enforcement, the guys used to say to me often, you're not going to stay here. Like you won't stay here long. And I was like, yeah, I will. And at the same time, there was this conversation that I would be slated for the assistant commissioner and I would someday rise through the ranks. And then there would be these other people who said, you're not going to stay there. And it was really interesting to hear the different voices of what people would say. And what I realized is that my mission has always been the same. Like it hasn't changed. Transforming lives through leadership is something that I did when I was 6. I just did it in a way that was different at 6, than I do at 52. Like it's just different iteration of what that looks like. And so, when you speak about the call to action, there was this catalyst, and I call it marriage. And my husband was in federal law enforcement, and we had lived in different states. And I was in New York, and he was in the United States of America. I was in New York, and he was in DC, and then I took a job in Georgia, and he took one in California, and I took one in Georgia. And if you know anything about the map of the United States of America, that's not like getting closer. It's actually all over the place. And so when my husband proposed, I just thought I was going to keep working in Dallas, Texas. And it was actually friends of mine that said, like, people usually get together and they're in the same household. And that's really what happened. And I went, that's interesting. And I had to really think about that, well, what really is my mission? Like, what am I called to do? And I realized that law enforcement gave me an ability to serve, and it gave me an ability to lead in a certain way. And it didn't matter what avenue that was happening, that I could do that in another avenue and still show up and be of service and still be in the leadership world. Mm-hmm. And so honestly, marriage was a huge catalyst for me. Now, I will tell you that there are other ones in that. How I was able to get to that is in being in law enforcement. I was failing at one point in my career, and I took a series of assessments and I scored a 0. Pains me to say that, because it wasn't a safe space to receive that in an interpersonal skills assessment. And the instructor continued and said, if Lisa invites you to do something, she really doesn't want you to be here. And if you invite her to do something, she's secretly wishing she was someplace else. And so this was said to me in a room of 25 leaders as I was seeking to improve my own leadership ability. And what I realized in that moment is that I had built some really strong barriers to keep me safe, but they were also keeping me out of having a meaningful and happy life. And so the conversation went something like, Lisa Marie, you might be smart and tough, you might be strong and you might be right, but you're going to be alone and dead. And in my field, that was really very true. And so there was this catalyst, as you speak about the call to action, to say, you've got to learn how to connect. You've got to learn how to be in conversation with others. You have to learn how to be able to understand what's important to them. And so that allowed me to succeed in the career in order to be able to be in the place with the marriage. And then that was the catalyst to then jump out of law enforcement, but with a skill set and a toolbox that allowed me to connect and open doors. So in the government, I ended up being the fastest promoted officer in the agency at the time. And in my business, I opened up the door and put out the shingle and ended up having clients almost immediately. And so I had that first, my first contract was a $50,000 contract in the coaching and training world, 17 years ago. And I wouldn't have had it without that catalyst of the zero, right? Like neither one would have been possible. And yet without the marriage piece, I may still be in the government because, that's what pushed me into because I never had that desire to be an entrepreneur. So it's sort of, the both and the zero, but then also the ability to bring that in and have that happen.
And they're both interconnected, right?
Yes.
They're both faces of the same thing.
Yes.
That the universe, Holy Spirit, however it is that you want to refer to it, was going, hello.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So that was the big hairy monster.
Yeah. Perhaps. I think there are other elements that have also come up that have been the
challenges.
Yeah, so because what I love about Joseph Campbell's work is it's never linear, right? Like it's not, it's very circular and there's concentric circles as well. And so, yes, yeah, exactly, which is what I so appreciate about him.
Yes. And there are no straight lines. There
Right.
are no straight lines. And you don't know what the dots are connecting until they're connected.
That is exactly it. That's exactly it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So who were some of your allies and mentors along the way?
Well, that's actually that's really fabulous because I don't know that I would have noticed some of them along the way. Like I've had to really reflect on what was that. So when I was in law enforcement, I was there during 9/11, and during 9/11, I lost my mentor. And I remember just being so angry at God that I was not, prior to that, because of some things that happened, that I was not having anything to do with God. And I remember going into church after 9/11 and sitting and crying and crying and crying. And there was a woman that when I would go back, she always was in the same spot. This woman was always there. And I realized that without realizing it, her name was Lillian. I'm still in touch with her today, but she was like an angel that was sent there to just be there. And still to this day, she remembers my birthday. She sends me a card on Christmas. It's not a lot of communication throughout the year, but it's just like, she's just there. And so I look at that as that's a mentor, and being able to see that in that way allowed me in my business to notice that there's people that are put along the way that it's not so much that they do this big thing where, you know, sometimes when you think about mentorship, it's like, well, you have the calls and you have them set up at certain time. You know, mentors show up in really interesting ways just by who they're being, that allows you to then go, oh, I get why, you know, that angel showed up for me, and I get what I'm supposed to see in that. And so I see that there have been so many mentors without me categorizing it in a formal way, from financial ones to spiritual ones to people who have allowed me to see things really differently in my business without ever establishing a formal relationship. And so there's a gentleman who allowed me to learn so much about cash flow and money, and from somebody who grew up with, you know, where it was sometimes a struggle for my mom to put food on the table. You know, I didn't see big numbers. And so when you get into business and you're dealing with organizations where you're talking about millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions and sometimes billions of dollars, like I didn't have a concept of that. And so, you know, Neville was just such a wonderful person to come into my life in order to help me make sense of some of that as I was growing my business. I could give you, you know, like I could give you a whole list of people, but I think about that because so often with business owners, in understanding the financials of business, that can be triggering for so many people. Right. And so him coming to me and explaining it in a way that was so digestible is a mentorship I'm deeply appreciative of. Understanding what it means to pay yourself, understanding what it means to value yourself. And I don't know that I would be where I'm at in my business without him.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, goodness. I've had several guests on who talk about money and financials and how amazingly triggering they are, and how people get into business and they want to help people and they want to do good and they have to give up because money is their biggest issue.
Right.
They just don't do the work to get over it. And it's heartbreaking because there's so much talent out there.
Right. And they have so much to give. And that was just exactly it. It was, you know, how do I navigate this? How do I figure this out? And I didn't, you know, one of the things is it's not like I had this awareness that I didn't have a healthy relationship with money. It's not like it wasn't like there was these signs that said that. It was just that as the business grew, I didn't really understand certain concepts because they just weren't part of my life.
Right. It just didn't make any sense.
Right. Exactly. So, you know, so many mentors on the journey, and all placed at the perfect spots. I kind of think about the journey as if I'm walking along the path, and here I am, I'm clearing out the twigs and the leaves and stuff, and I'm blazing my trail. And then all of a sudden I uncover and I'm like, oh, there you are. And then I go a little bit further. Oh, there you are. Because they're there along the way. Once I stay the course and clear my path, they're put like just in the perfect spots. So I've had that happen in terms of relationship mentors, and ones for physical fitness, and ones in the business, like I say, with the financials, in the business with marketing, pretty much every area. And that's what I kind of think about them as, these totems that have shown up along the way on the journey.
Yes. And my experience is that they show up and say, well, you could do that. You could, it would work, but if you do this instead, it works a whole lot better.
Yes. Yeah. You know, absolutely. It's like learning, the learning curve gets shortened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Much.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, big time. So what about those folks along the way who maybe didn't understand? You talked about being the first person to go to college. And so you broke the mold in that one. Were there people who just didn't get it about what you were doing, especially when you formed your own business and you were getting away from the quote unquote, what do they call it? The regular paycheck, or the
Right.
right? The safety and stability of the paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I had people who really had, I believe, my best interest, and just couldn't see that there was another way. And when in getting the job in the government, not only is it considered to be the regular paycheck, but it's pretty safe. If you're going to have some sort of down in the economy, the likelihood of you losing your job is really slim. You're probably going to be able to be there for forever. And having family members who'd worked in organizations that went out of business, went bankrupt, and they lost everything, their pension, their livelihood, this was a great fear. And so, for my dad, when he found out I was going to quit, he sent me a check every week, because he was like, what are you going to do to eat? And he was very concerned, what's going to happen to you? And yet, I understood what a great act of love to do that. And that's how I really saw it, was a great act of love. And, there were people in law enforcement who told me over and over again, women shouldn't be in it, and nor should they be, they're not smart enough to be in supervision either. And in fact, when I opened my business, so I've had my business, it'll be 18 years in April of 2022. And I will say that there was a speaking engagement that I had put in for an organization, and it probably was about 12 years ago. So I think I was in business at least 6 years, maybe a little longer. And the organization was a large Fortune company. And they said that the reason why they didn't select me is because they've never had a speaker who was a woman talk on leadership. And I was astonished. I was really astonished. And so I find that there have been people who've come along the way and said things like that have had me go, well, that's interesting. It's what it does is it gives me perspective, right? It just gives me perspective. And it's not anything that gets me upset. It is really just, why is this coming to me? Why am I hearing this information? Why is this showing up? What am I supposed to learn from this? How do I use this in order for good? What do I do with it? And, in the case of my dad, it was oh, I really get that there's such a love, he's such love, and he's really deeply concerned. And in the case of that organization, I had to go, wow, there's organizations out there like that. And this is important for me to understand as I'm in conversation with them. And what are some of the individuals that I'm working with in the coaching field, in the leadership coaching world? What are they experiencing at work when that's the message, or then that's the principle? So that's really good information for me. And, in the case of even in the government and in the work, noticing, when people are in their own fears. I've never seen it before. I've never seen a woman in supervision, or somebody who speaks. I remember at the academy, I had a guy who used to sit in front of me, and he used to say to me something in the essence of, women shouldn't be heard, they shouldn't be so loud, is the bottom line. And what I realized in that is that, there are perceptions that we each experience, and there are, whether they're an unconscious bias or whether they're just a childhood expression, how that comes out and how that affects somebody's psyche, their well-being. For me, I believe that early on, those things I was so sensitive to, and I took them so personal. And, now in life, I look at them as being the greatest teachers, and I'm really grateful for them. They give me the ability to be deeply, grounded. And when I'm doing my coaching, because I've coached and trained over 100,000 leaders all over the world, what I want them to walk away with is feeling valued, appreciated, and loved. And that's more important to me than years ago, which was, I want you to understand how smart I am and how I have the right answer and all of these other things. And now it's, I just want you to be in that whatever experience that you've had. I want to say, I'm sorry. And I want to say, like, I'm sorry that you went through that. And at the same time, what's the gift in that? And leave them feeling valued and appreciated and loved versus it being about me. And so those experiences, without them, I wouldn't be able to be coaching in that place today.
Right. Absolutely. 100%. And speaking of your coaching, you have a gift to offer my audience.
I do. I love gifts. So I love gifts. Like, I think gifts are wonderful. I think everybody should get gifts every day. I know some people aren't motivated by it, and I know some people aren't, but I think gifts are just, I think they're wonderful. It doesn't matter if it's like just a card, and because it's not just a card. It's like when I get a card in the mail, I'm excited. It's like its own little gift and a little message. And so for me, my time is like the most precious commodity that I have. And so I recently had made the decision, I don't even do this. I recently made the decision that I have this influential leadership blueprint that I created. And it's a fabulous blueprint that you have the ability to walk through these 3 steps, fill in your answers, and you actually have the ability to be in action on it, so that you can it's what I call immediately implementable strategies. Like, it's something you can immediately put into action, and you can see a result within a very short period of time. And so that's really important to me, is like, can you do something and then receive a result from it? And so this influential leadership blueprint, I want to be able to give to the people that are here, because it has the ability to both increase your influence, allows you to make a bigger difference on the planet, and do whatever you're called to do on your own hero's journey. And the other part for me is on my website, UpsideThinking.com. There is an opportunity to get on my calendar. And I don't really do that. Like, I don't. And so, I don't know how long I will, keep that up, but I prayed about it, and God said I'm supposed to be here with you. And so there's that opportunity to get on my calendar and have a conversation with me about leadership. So that's my gift.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That is extremely generous.
Well, I so delighted to be here. So delighted to be here. And Upside Thinking has been around, like I said, for quite a while. And so not something I typically do, but I was told to be here on this call with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. I love your hero's journey. It's still triggering for me to hear guys saying that women shouldn't be XYZ in the 21st century, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Anyway, and here we are. We're recording this during National Women's Month, and just after the International Day of Women. So I've got this top of mind sort of thing. It's like, what?
Yeah.
You're still doing that. And it's all good. You're here. You did what you needed to do. You got your voice, your presence, and your brilliance out there. And I so appreciate that you answered the call to be on my show.
Well, I am truly delighted. This was an honor to be here with you. I appreciated you bringing Joseph Campbell's work to life. And once again, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to my audience of the sweet sound of success. are your dreams for your business? You know what drives me crazy? Really smart business owners denying their talents because they've been taught it has to be hard, because they've been taught that they don't deserve their gifts, that they're not worth anything. They've been taught that their gender means they can't express their genius. I'm Sue Wilhite, and I want you to have access to your genius. I want you to go out and rock the world with your genius. So I created the Call to Action Coaching Program. It's all about getting to the heart of you and what you've got to share with the world to make a profitable business that thrives and allows you to make a difference in the world. Click the link to sign up for the Call to Action Coaching Program today. Don't let your genius go unnoticed.